Welcome, dear listener. We begin again, not in a hurry, not with noise, but in the stillness that comes at the close of a long day. Our path continues through Lewis County. The forest remains tall and quiet in the north, but below the surface, something stirs. Settlements are no longer clusters of cabins, but growing towns and roads, schools, post offices, and shops. There is a rhythm to life here now, steady and strong. Tonight, we'll walk through the middle decades of the 1800s. We'll visit the people and the places who brought this county from its earliest days into an era of reform, invention, and resilience. We'll see how the landscape shapes their lives and how, slowly, they began to shape it in return. So, take a deep breath, lie back if you like, and let your mind follow the path ahead. This is still the land of pines and rivers, but the echoes of axes have given way to the sounds of sawmills and wagon wheels. So let's begin. In the early 1830s, Lewis County's boundaries were firm, but its interior still held wild places. Croghan, settled first in 1830 and formed as a town in 1841, rose in the heart of this wooded interior. Named after Colonel George Croghan of War of 1812 fame, the town was born from the dense forest that still covered much of the eastern county. French, Canadian, and German immigrants began arriving, drawn by logging opportunities and cheap land. New Bremen, settled in 1826 and formed officially in 1848, was shaped by Swiss and German families who brought with them the knowledge of cheese-making, woodworking, and small-scale farming. It became known for its industrious spirit and a strong sense of community. The first churches were built from hand-hewn beams and filled with hymns in German. The town of Watson was created in 1854. It was carved from the eastern wilderness, and though smaller than its neighbors, Watson would later become a hub of tanneries, mills, and one of the most important early lumber centers of the county. These towns began with trees and hope, but through shared labor, schools, churches, and a desire for connection, they became something more: communities. Travel across Lewis County in the 1830s and 40s was slow and very unpredictable. Roads, where they existed, were rutted and muddy, and many farmers relied on sleighs in the winter, when the snow packed hard and smooth over the rough terrain. The Black River Canal began in the 1830s and completed in stages through the 1850s, was intended to connect the Black River to the Erie Canal system. Though the canal never reached Lewis County fully, its planned arrival inspired investments, business hopes, and boosted towns like Lowville and Port Leyden. More importantly, wagon routes and stage roads began linking the towns to the outside markets. Inns and taverns appeared at intervals, offering rest for travelers and mail stops for the county's growing network of post offices. By the late 1850s, the first whispers of a railroad line began to stir. The major rail boom wouldn't come until after the Civil War, but the very idea of iron tracks through the wilderness signaled that change was coming, fast and loud. Now, at this point, Nearly every town in Lewis County had at least one church, sometimes two or three. Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Presbyterian, and Catholic congregations dotted the countryside. Churches were more than a place of worship. They were social centers, sometimes schools and meeting halls, and sanctuaries. One thing that happened was ministers traveled circuit routes in the early days, visiting the scattered families on horseback. Later, permanent pastors settled in towns like Martinsburg, West Turin, and Denmark. And let's not forget about education, because education grew alongside the churches. Most towns built small wooden schoolhouses within a few miles of each cluster of homes. Children from farms walked through mud and snow with slates in hand and lunches wrapped in cloth. They learned spelling, arithmetic, and moral lessons from McGuffrey's readers. The first academy in Lowville became a point of pride for the community. It drew students from neighboring towns and offered a higher level of instruction in literature, history, and natural science. The people of Lewis County, though rural and often isolated, placed deep value on learning and spiritual life. Reform and change in the 1840s and 50s was a national wave that swept through Lewis County and carried on sermons, pamphlets, and visiting speakers. The temperance movement found strong support in towns like Turin and Lowville, where pastors and reformers urged families to sign pledges and reject alcohol. Though taverns remained in operation, many young men joined local temperance societies and organized public lectures in barns and schoolhouses. Abolitionist sentiments also took root, though quietly. Lewis County did not see a large anti-slavery protest of large cities, but personal letters and church records show that many residents supported the cause. A few homes in Lowville were rumored to serve as stops on the Underground Railroad, though secrecy meant little was ever written down. Women, too, began speaking out. In rural areas like West Leyden and Watson, women's sewing circles became space for more than stitching. They hosted readings, discussions of women's rights, and support for charities. The people of Lewis County lived far from Albany and Washington, but their hearts and minds were not untouched by the tides of change. Here, farming remained the backbone of life. But farmers started to look at adding to their fields. Before, they would just make enough food for their family and maybe some get-togethers. But now, they were looking at market agriculture, where they could produce more and sell to others. Dairy farming boomed, especially in Lowville, Denmark, and New Bremen. Cheese became the county's signature product, and they formed co-ops, built cheese factories, and shipped them by port along the Black River. Logging expanded dramatically in Croghan, Watson, and Gregg. Lumber camps operated seasonally, and logs were floated down creeks to mills. Entire hillsides were stripped, only to regrow and be harvested again the decades to come. One thing people don't think about is the tanneries. They appeared in the East, using hemlock bark for the tanning of leather. Small factories in Port Leyden and Casterland produced furniture, tools, and machinery parts, often powered by water wheels or small steam engines. Though much of the county remained rural, The seeds of local industry were clearly taking root. Life in this county was hard, but it had a rhythm. Men and boys rose early to tend fields or animals. Women churned butter, wove cloth, and kept households running all season long. Children helped with chores, but also played, chasing each other through hayfields or sliding across a frozen pond. Winters were long. Snow piled deep, especially in the Tug Hill region. Homes were heated with wood stoves, and lights came from candles or oil lamps. Neighbors gathered for spelling bees, cider boilings, quilting bees, and the occasional winter dance. In spring, roads turned to mud. Planting began as soon as the frost lifted. Summer was a time of relentless work. Fields, livestock, mending, preserving food. And then came the fall, the harvest, the gathering in, and the quiet return to hearth and home. Every season had its tasks, and every home had its story. As the 1850s drew to a close, the air across the nation grew tense. The election of 1860 looms. Newspapers in Lewis County carried headlines about southern states threatening secession. Debates raged over slavery, union, and state rights. Families in Denmark, Leiden, and Pinckney gathered at grange halls and taverns to argue, to worry, and to prepare. Many young men, still farm boys in the 1859, would soon wear uniforms and march to drums far from home. But that, my friends, is a story for another night. Tonight, we walked a little further through Lewis County's past. From cabins to churches, from ox carts to stagecoaches, from quiet farms to the edge of war. We've seen the land not just tamed, but treasured. We've heard the voices of reformers and teachers, farmers and mill workers, mothers and children, all shaping a country that still stands today. And now, we rest. Thank you for joining me. Until the next quiet walk through history. Good night.